Alright, so re-uploading this video. Before getting to this Homeland Security data from 2023, I have to segue first, and this won't come off as a good look from a lefty, but I didn't want to explain the right-wing evil without first tackling the Biden administration's gaffe. Whatever happens still feeds to stakeholder capitalism. So there's a whole lot of confusion on what or if there's an immigration problem, and it's complicated. The mistakes made by the Biden administration will last with us for a long time, whether an accident or not. And I don't think any of the uh, deportations that Trump is doing is actually going to settle any of this. And I'm absolutely not talking about the concept of asylum and birthright citizenship. I think the issue for some is forgetting where the line is in terms of amount of immigrants fitting comfortably generally as an infrastructure issue. Um, Also, the line drawn on what or if on what it means with birthright, because it's about people who live here already, not necessarily people waiting to come in, which isn't a moral issue until you have been living here. Obviously, we all feel bad preventing innocent people crossing the border from coming in. But based on my speculation why they're removing the birthright citizenship, one of the massive issues is H-1B workers replacing birthright citizenships families, because elites want labor in different sectors, and so they're scapegoating this Biden gaffe as a reason to scapegoat that. Uh, and so labor in different sectors where they might not have as much political power as opposed to average immigration via asylum and birthright citizenship, turning immigration to a more of a private business asset. Trump is not going to just write away birthright citizenship. Recently, a judge from Seattle blocked his attempt, but Biden's mistake was an amazing opportunity for right wingers to prioritize immigrants into different sectors. So, as you can see, overall, 95.8% of all inadmissible aliens who scheduled appointments through the app during the time were ultimately issued a notice to appear and released into the United States on parole. And parole in this case is not a crime uh, terminology, so just so you know, don't wrap that up. The document showed, uh, okay, so the list goes on, honestly, and this is way more than the burst of thousands via quotas that nations generally uphold, but this is kind of crazy, but so I personally don't think the Biden administration did this on purpose, but Biden administration negligence is random because during the Bush years, Biden voted yes on Bush's border wall, and even in a video of him from 2008 saying cartels and gangs are bringing drugs from the border. So our divided country made him possibly sensitive about national security, plus some flaw in the digital asylum process. This is not like Elon Musk flying purposefully migrants into the swing states to vote for Trump, though Biden administration's gaffe was a little worse because it wasn't a controlled situation. Though Elon obviously is doing direct harm, while Biden administration immigration weren't directed in the same way, what Elon did was far more nefarious. So, this is not the first time right wingers have spoken at Davos, Switzerland, and I'm not playing the sound just so I don't get copyright struck. So, on January 23rd, 2025, I woke up to seeing Trump at the World Economic Forum. The day before that, I was making a video about Trump and the World Economic Forum, so the coincidence was wild. So, right wingers like Glenn Beck have a book about how Biden is in cahoots with world elites at Davos, Switzerland, but the elites only care who toe their line to expand the big tech 2035 agenda. The rollout starting with Trump recently announcing the Stargate AI infrastructure. So, anyway, getting to the past right wingers at Davos. Oh wait, I do. This is not at Davos actually. All right, so this is at a CPAC actually. All right. So there was a right-wing CPAC summit was held, hosted by Libertarian President Javier Milei. Top figures like Bolsonaro, Steve Bannon, Eric, and Laura Trump showed up at the gala. An economist who attended announced, quote, "The West is in danger. We must not let socialism advance. We must oppose regulations and shed the idea of market failure and stop the advancement of the murderous abortion agenda." So, uh, in that order, I think in America, abortion was banned, and then the Chevron deference to regulate markets was overturned, and so now we have market deregulation, which is exactly what Milei did to Argentina, taking away regulations and doing a type of shock doctrine, taking away necessities like electricity. Electricity bills for middle class families set to jump 155%. Uh, state wants to cut state wants cost of supports lower to 0.8% of GDP from 1.5%. So, of course, Trump probably abandoned some level of right wing support because of the HB1 program agenda with Elon Musk and Silicon Valley. But who knows, maybe they're back in favor due to the attack on birthright citizenship. So, in January 23rd, 2025, Milei gave another speech at Davos. He goes on to say that Argentina has gone through over 100 years of economic turmoil because of weak military stances, closing off trade, etc. Broadly goes into achievements of Argentina and Western countries building civilization in the past. Progress, he claims, is lost and must return from a type of colonial, quote, pioneering spirit, which is based on its Greco Roman heritage and Judeo Christian values, end quote, who are responsible for lifting 90% of humans from poverty, though nature is poor is a common economic thought. Poverty reduction, he goes on to say, is only possible through life, liberty, and property, free trade and religion, etc., as the pillars of civilization. In the same sentence, tells people what they saw didn't happen. Quote, the pioneering spirit that today is represented, among others, by my dear friend Elon Musk, who has been unjustly vilified by the wokeism ideology in recent days by an innocent gesture that simply reflects his enthusiasm and gratitude towards a people. End quote. To Malay, wokeism and the state are one and the same and contributes to perceived unnecessary luxuries. Quote, first it was education, then housing, and from then on absurdities like access to the internet, televised football, theater, cosmetic treatments, and an endless number of other desires that were turned into fundamental human rights. End quote. So obviously, we could talk about the truths of these extra things, image issues from the fashion industry, etc. But he's tanking Argentina by removing what's needed to potentially eliminate wokeness from the citizens, harming anyone politically. And in his mind, human rights were meant to strip individuals from their actual rights by the state, to walk a strict tightrope that is bringing down society. Quote, feminism, diversity, inclusion, equity, immigration, abortion, environmentalism, gender ideology, among others, are all various heads of the state, same beast, aimed at justifying the state's expansion through the appropriation and distortion of noble causes. End quote. I think there's some truth here, but 10 years ago, I had a similar idea which must make me a libertarian, right? So in 2014, 2017, I had a philosophical take that was social justice warriors with a new blank slate. I didn't believe in the blank slate necessarily, but it was a good segue to begin. So basically, some aspects uh, of fighting the church involved nurture over nature of God. The blank slate, where we created our lives and morals away from what the church wanted. In this case, social justice as a concept, I thought, was no longer needed to guide our morals and lives. Thinking social justice warriors or activists were anachronistic complaints, that our main problems were settled, and so activists weren't as real to me, and hijacked by what I called, quote, interest groups, end quote, with an ulterior motive. But I think Javier Milei is gaslighting, like Elon saying Democrats are flying in immigrants to swing states. Unfortunately, it's the market selling every lifestyle, selling back the people revolution in movies and art, corporations selling the fantasy of taking them down, algorithms tailored to wokeness, even if the youth tried revolutionizing the web in a naive way. The market, which is Malay's game, has brought elements of the revolution into hollowed out social justice causes, but the well meaning types were needed, and they're still needed to this day, despite the perpetual cycle. These economists are aware of setting up a prefabricated war on the backs of freedom they're taking away. That's my speculation. So, I thought this was a little strange. This came out all of a sudden, but this was definitely alarming. So Elon attended a Alternative for Germany rally. He stood before about 4,500 AFD supporters. They should celebrate and said they should celebrate German culture and should be proud. Just very quickly reading from She Has Her Mother's Laugh, quote, in 24, uh, in 2015, Elon Musk was questioned by a reporter about the dangers of genetic manipulation. Elon questioning the reporter with the same thing. Quote, how do you avoid the Hitler problem? I don't know. End quote. Well, we know he's not avoiding it. And for Elon, the problem isn't a moral one, but a demographic preservation equation. Elon also telling the AFD audience, it's good to be proud of German culture, German values, and to not lose that in some sort of multiculturalism that dilutes everything. End quote. Kai Arsheimer, a political scientist, implied it's not just about mixed demographics, but Germany potentially needed a crisis to bolster its opinions, going on to say, it's a party that's been isolated in European Parliament, even though, uh, sorry, even even far-right parties don't want to cooperate with AFD. We had this huge influx of refugees from the Middle East, mostly from Syria, and that accelerated this development of the party. End quote. In the book Reproductive Racism, where I first learned of this event in Germany called the Summer of Migration in 2015, due to a Syrian civil war, or what was called European migrant crisis. This isolated radical party is Elon's Hitler problem, and his best hope for Germany, Musk told his audience. Alright, getting to this book very soon, which in my opinion is relevant for this moment in Germany. And while Trump is doing mass deportation for better or worse, I truly believe this won't end well. Trump's attack on birthright citizenship is different from the ICE quotas, I think, but it implies it's not about innocent people trying to live their life or about catching criminals, but hollowing out the country for the 2035 automation scheme. They always use tragedy for their agenda. From 9/11, COVID, fear of woke, the CB1 era, the right wing adore Biden administration's gaffe. Quoting from an article right now, literally arresting veterans, Ross J. Baraka, the Democratic mayor of Newark, New Jersey, said on Thursday that ICE raided a local business and detained undocumented residents as well as citizens without producing a warrant. He added that the U.S. military veteran was among the people detained, that he, quote, suffered the indignity of having the legitimacy of his military documentation questioned, end quote. So obviously, they don't care about the possibility of arresting innocent people anymore. It's a less drastic purge that could easily escalate. All right, getting to this book. So I've been wanting to read this for a while. I actually wanted to wait to read this when the physical copy came, which I actually ordered. But yeah, this is in relation to what's happening in Germany turning far right. So this is part one. I'll be reading more very soon. Like and subscribe. All right, introduction. Reproductive racism, migration, birth control, and the specter of population. Too much population or too little? Which social group should have children and which should rather be kept from bearing? And also, who should be allowed to cross national borders? Who should be given the right to stay and who should definitely not? These ways of addressing some lives are more others as valuable, involve highly timely and explosive questions The hierarchization of lives as foundation for global power relations involves multiple dimensions of structural violence, from thousands of deaths in the Mediterranean to the socially unequal consequences of the climate crisis, wars, and pandemic policies, from class selective migration management to coercive anti-natalist programs in the global south. Even if this appears often hardly tangible, at the heart of these political hierarchies of living and dying, there is a specter doing its mischief, the specter of population. This specter makes it possible to link together, hold on, stratified fertility and migration policies in a problematic way. It provides a common ground for powerful agendas of controlling borders and reproductive bodies based on dangerous imaginaries of an effectively managed national or global demographic future, and it thereby lays the foundations for reproductive racism. The specter of population makes it possible to translate abstract calculations into class selective and racist strategies of governing, and it links together the management of social groups and individual reproductive bodies. It thus permeates the project of global capitalist statehood itself and shows up within Malthusian narratives. These narratives provide ways of reinterpreting nearly every current crisis as a demographic crisis, ascribing paradoxically poverty, hunger, refugee crisis, or ecological destruction to those groups and bodies that are most exposed to these harms. By interpreting social and ecological crises as demographic ones, the spectrum of population thus makes it possible to leave the status quo of systemic social relations of care, inequality, racism, and global capitalist destruction untouched. In the context of demographic rationalities, reproductive racism also comprehends the stratified reproductive policies that aim to shape the reproduction of whole national or global populations in an unequal way. Reproductive racism thus addresses both the powerful relations that define which and whose children should be born and which and who should better not be, and also those hierarchical strategies that define who should be a part of an imagined nation or global future with border and migration policies as important elements. It is true that these strategies of hierarchical valuization of lives include untangible power relations that go beyond racism in a narrow sense. Nevertheless, the term reproductive racism is appropriate because race remains at the heart of the population, or its ghost and grammar, as Michael Murphy puts it. In the end, racism permeates all of those colonial social Darwinist and class-related imaginaries that guarantee the naturalization of differences at a global level. In order to approach the specter of population and its dangerous effects of reproductive racism, we need to a coherent analysis of demographic knowledge production and demographic governance strategies as inseparable from each other. Only by taking a closer look at these complex demographic nationalities and by dissecting and dismantling them in all their dimensions can we understand an often impenetrable mechanism that make it very difficult to grasp them critically. This opacity arises, for instance, when methodological nationalism is assumed to be self evident, even if it has extremely violent and exclusionary implications. It also occurs when highly speculative long term population projections are introduced in order to legitimize problematic policy decisions today. Demographic narratives also escape critical scrutiny to the fact that they often start with seemingly neutral and abstract quantitative population data. But in the course of the argument, these data, sorry about that, but in the course of the argument, these data are linked to hierarchical qualitative valuations of different social groups, often without any justification for these connections being offered. So, I don't want this video to be too long for my tablet, so I will see you in the next one, guys. Like and subscribe again.